Hi, I'm Larry Dignan with Constellation Insights, and I'm here with Mike Nee. He is our analyst covering data to decisions. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Larry, always fun.
So I've been kind of thinking through 2026 predictions and asking each analyst what's the one thing CXOs need to do in 2026.
If there's just one thing, it's going to be that 2026 becomes a year of decision velocity and how to start looking at putting the pieces together for the shift towards a decision-centric architecture.
So, what do we look like when we hit decision velocity nirvana? I guess what's the end state? We can kind of start there and work backwards.
We've been talking about this for a long time. We've all been in technology for a while, and decision velocity, it's really that accuracy, right? The impact it has, the timeliness. And this is where we've been saying the ability to sense, decide, act, and learn at enterprise scale and repeat that safely has been sort of that nirvana. And what we're really looking at from 2025 is a lot of the groundwork has been put in place to really start shifting that focus, right? Going from POCs, proof of concepts to proof of value, and the shift towards process automation, all driven by how do I collapse a lot of decisions that have been previously needed humans in the loop.
So, do you think the building blocks are all in place, or is that for like early adopters? I mean, I agree. Like between agentic AI and all the connections and the data platforms, it seems like all the parts are there. I'm not sure I've seen anybody put it together per se.
Well, and this is where you already see consolidation happening. Data platforms have moved up to be data and AI. There's plenty of reasons for that. We won't get into it. When you say components, the big chunks are there. And what we're still missing is this next layer, which is going to rise to support the ability to have automation at scale, which is context. People talk about RAG. They've talked about a lot of the components, vector databases. We've been playing with a lot in 2025. In 2026, context engineering replaces prompt engineering as the AI pressure point. And we're going to see that as bringing a lot of these components together and providing governance, which is something we're going to have to experience. A lot of first movers have hit those friction points in 2025. Now you're seeing some of that being productized and moved into helping connect a lot of these components we're going to use for decision velocity in 2026.
What is the difference? I mean, we've kind of had this debate internally too. What's the difference between decision velocity and simply automation?
Well, let's take a look at it from the big shifts in sort of architecture. Yesterday we used to be talking about data, analytics, and insight. Today we're going data, context, decisions and actions. Let me just give you a quick example. We just talked to Esteban about this. When I'm in a car heading to the airport and I call United and I have a flight coming up, should I have to explain all that to an agent? Or should I be meted immediately by an agent that's actually understanding that I probably don't have enough time to make my flight and give me some options? Look, we talk about the shift of basic automation. Yeah, we know how to execute on things. If I want to change a plane, I actually have now an app for that. Look, we've had an app for that since iPhone, right? But we don't have that guidance in terms of how do we actually move analytic or have automation, AI-driven automation, make smarter decisions for us.
So I guess walk me through the change management here. How much is decision velocity based on culture, technology, building blocks? I guess what's all that's missing here?
Well, what's interesting is it is a combination of culture and technology. If I look at the conversations we've had with executives and we work with a lot of leading organizations, modernization of their data stack has been something ongoing for years. 80-20, probably good enough. What's going to change is the approach. We're going to start looking at process automation and how do we actually think about the decisions within that. And that means I actually now have something that's measurable, right? A lot of the failures of the years past has been not owning something that's measurable, have an owner, but also within that context, I now know exactly how I want to structure the data, some of the semantics or the data about the data that then allows me to do experimentation and iteration on the AI-driven automation on that. And so what you're going to see is a shift towards teams that can actually take on and own processes and not just make a one-time reengineering, but continuously change and find new opportunities. And that's what we're going to see is a shift for both the technologies and discover what we still need with the organizational design and the type of enablement that's needed to have these type of distributed change management.
So the game is to get to a decision quickly, and then what happens after the decision?
Well, this is actually where we have a lot of tools in place to just automate closure. So there's two things going on. One, we start with just discrete decisions, right? How do I actually decide if I want to give a loan, right? With now I have the ability to say, hey, is this loan someone I can do straight through processing and gives me this margin? Here's another decision option, which is I can do a little more human engagement to get a little more margin from that potential deal. Or I have something I can do, a sit down and actually do a full review of their process. Now, giving options is a step towards either human taking that execution next step, or increasingly putting other agents to now execute behind that. And now we're just talking about, from a decision, being able to drive what we've already built, which is a ton of automation to then close on a transaction. And so what we're seeing is, first and foremost, the decision is the unlock, which is allowing for a whole level of new automation, which couldn't have been done before because I needed humans. But the second thing is we're going to see is a shift towards collapsing decision trees. That means these small decisions, as I start iterating, I realize, hey, if I only had a little more information about how this customer has been dealing with my historical loans, I could look at how I can actually collapse this into a full loan portfolio. Now I have actually a broader decision that can actually collapse all the decisions underneath that, so I can then automate at a different level. And so what we're seeing is decision first, smaller decisions, automations on the backside of that, or human engagement, and then starting to collapse these decisions and into collapsing decision trees to get to some of the 5-10x improvements we're seeing leaders actually able to achieve with decision automation.
And how does this help your iteration?
It's perfect question. And this is where not only leaders, but actually TSPs, SIs are all jumping on the same game. This is an iterative game. V1 is going to be, how do I start leveraging data and analytics and AI to help make a better decision and start simplifying a process? But this is just, like I said, a start, and it's just going to continue to iterate. And so from a change management perspective, from a skill set perspective, from an ongoing management perspective, this is an ongoing process of continuous reengineering.
All right, good stuff. Anything I didn't ask that I should have?
Well, I would say that we're looking at just what are some of the changes that we should see in 2026 that we should be looking towards. One, decision velocity is certainly going to become a new board level metric and a yardstick that we can baseline and then look at how much improvement we get. Decision-centric architectures become more and more a central word as we replace analytics-centric stacks. This is about BI becoming an input, not a destination, which is why so much messaging from the platform vendors have been not around data foundations, but around how they enable decisions and automation. And certainly you see agentic AI get absorbed into the platforms. It's a feature, right? This is not around an end goal by itself. And this really has implications across the board. And so we have a bunch of predictions that we'll be talking about in terms of how this whole shift towards decision automation begins to actually shift where we spend our time and where we want to spend our investment dollars for technology.
So you mentioned, last question, you mentioned, we could do this forever. So last question, you mentioned the boardroom metrics, and what is the metric that would measure decision velocity? Or is it more like an outcome like savings? Or I guess what is that metric to measure that?
It's a great question. And one will tell you what it's not. What it is not is, sort of model, depth, et cetera. What we're really talking about is decision velocity is around a process. And how do I actually close on that process? It's made of 3 things around the decision. One, is it accurate? Was it able to return accurate decisions? Number 2, can I make it fast, right? When we talk about velocity, it's how fast can we actually collapse this decision? How many steps do we take out? How many times do we have to move to a human? But also number 3, it's about impact. And this is why the decision velocity metric needs to be baselined by process. Is it around decreased call volume or volumes that had to be actually pushed to a human? Is it around the return on marketing campaigns? Again, what we're seeing is each process has its own metrics. And this is why it's moving from sort of these POCs or these proof of concepts, these co-pilots and pilots, which were true, so 2024, 25, to processes, because they are measurable. They have owners who are rewarded or, have to face the impact of that metric. And hence we have a measurability, which is actually going to be part of what transforms and is the pressure to transform organizations to uptake decision automation.
All right. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to tracking this throughout 2026.
Looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.